as a former teacher and a former administrator, I find that these masks are super powerful. And I think oftentimes, if we are expecting students to bring their whole selves, maybe a lot of educators forget that,
Mhm.
one. Two, educators have gotten really good at embedding themselves in the expertise of a subject, and
Mm.
so therefore, I cannot be questioned, or I cannot be a kid who doesn't like my class is somehow a personal threat against my existence,
Mhm.
and so now I am mad at this kid because he hates my class, as opposed to being like, "Yeah, no worries. I had plenty of classes I hated too when I was in school, so you don't have to like this class, but I'm here to support you to be successful."
Right.
And I think that what I've met with several, not every, several educators is this idea that this kid doesn't wanna be here, and I'm
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, this room is actually pretty ugly." You know what I'm saying? Like,
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't wanna be here either.
Right, right.
So, like, don't take it personal, and what can we do to support that kid? As opposed to, like, this kid is the problem, right? Because I think that times, because we have now become adults who have these degrees and status and a job and the keys to the room,
Mhm.
we get to have all the power, and I think that that often creates a lot of the barriers, and so educators bring the self that they think can hold on to that power, even when there's stuff in their life that's falling apart, and
Mm.
they can easily become projectors of that stuff on students, right? And I think that, you know, what I when I do professional development with educators, I'm always talking about the idea that there is so much more to you than anybody can see by looking at you,
Mhm.
and there's more to your students. So if you take a kid not paying attention in your class as a definition of that kid that doesn't care about their education or their future, that's a huge leap.
Right.
I mean, that's a huge leap from a kid who doesn't wanna be in your class to the fact that this kid has no desire to be an educated being. Maybe we're stretching a little bit. Maybe we're stretching a little bit,
Yeah.
you know? And as an administrator, I had to go and talk to educators around, "Okay, um, what's happening? What's happening?" And you realize there's a personality conflict there.
Mhm. Mhm.
And stop this kid from being an amazing kid. It means you and this student have a conflict that we have to help figure out. And
Mhm.
I found that sometimes, educators are sometimes the worst students, right? Right? They're
Yeah.
they're the worst students. And my job as a teacher of teachers, a trainer, is
Yeah.
to be like, "Hey, maybe you came here and you don't want to be here. I get
Mhm.
it."
Mhm.
And I want you to think about that kid who walks in your class every day and you know they don't want to be there.
Right. Right.
What story do you tell yourself about that kid?
Mhm.
And so imagine, as humans, we tell ourselves many stories. So imagine, like, if I were you telling a story about you, about how you sit in the back with your arms folded, grading papers while I'm talking, doing something else. But we're adults, so we don't have to follow the same rules of learning that anyone else follows, do we?
Right.
And how do we help educators get into a mindset of understanding that, oh, we're talking about human stuff. We're not talking about power dynamics between adults and kids. We're talking about like what human look like. And so if you come to PD grouchy, already mad, and you want me to somehow keep smiling and keep trying to pull you along, and you should imagine how that feels for me as
Right.
the facilitator of this experience, right? And I think that when I help teachers to kind of recognize what they do,
Mhm.
which are the qualities that they actually to the verge of despising in students, that they begin to realize, "Oh, wait a minute, that's I'm projecting. I'm projecting some of my stuff of how I used to be, am, was, think about," and I think that's the work that we try and do. And so
I mean, you nailed it. I think that's the critical first step in any pedagogical process is for teachers to take like a personal inventory, just who you are, how are you feeling, how are you projecting it? And you mentioned as educators and administrators, they get all these fancy letters next to their name and then somehow feel entitled to put students through this deficit thinking, this lens of deficit thinking. And, students, they don't have the language to like, oh, my teacher, administrator is completely viewing us through this deficit model, but what they are doing is voting with their feet, or they're like, you put out that energy, kids, they get that 100%. We know that. And I think it's something that we as educators and administrators need to really recognize and take more. time to critically self-reflect on
Mm,
not only what we've achieved as professionals, but who we are as humans. Like we're all impacted by social issues. We were all impacted by COVID on some level. We were all impacted by the 2020 demonstrations from George Floyd on some level. We think about Ukraine right now. Like we all have something that is tied together. And so I think it's an opportunity for educators to recognize that, yes, at the essence of this work in education is really trying to support young humans to be better humans. And so
yeah,
that's the thing. And yes, you can be a math whiz and your content knowledge and physics is through the roof and you've got all these awards. But if you can't communicate that to your students who have historically been on the margins, what are we doing? You know?
yeah, yeah.
And so there's
Ooh-wee.
yeah. So how do we bake in some humility in that knowledge that we gain from all of these professional accolades?
Well, I tell teachers, look, if you care more about the subject that you are teaching than the subjects who you are teaching, there's probably going to be a disconnect.
Hmm.
Because I've met many a kids who, if I don't show up someday at school, this kid's gonna make up their own homework.
Right.
I met kids, and I met kids that if I deliver the homework to their house with a pencil and a manila folder, that homework ain't coming back. So if you are understanding that my job is to teach those people in the same room at the same time, I need to recognize that it's more than the subject.
Right. Right.
It gotta be about who they are. What am I missing? What am I missing that you need to be able to understand and see more of yourself right now?
I was talking with a fellow colleague about how to connect with his students, and he shared with me, one thing that he does is he just asks the student, you know, if something's going on, like, how long have we known each other? And let's say the student's been in your class for 2 months, but the student might answer like a couple days. And so that in itself is a relationship kind of barometer on like how well you're connecting with your students. And so he's like,
Mhm,
if you use that simple question, you might be able to really connect with these students. You're like, how long have we known each other? Oh, 3 years.
mhm,
This is why we're engaging in this type of conversation versus.
mhm.
And I think that helps to center the student. It helps to also, build that relationship to where students are then trusting enough to take those academic risks. Because I don't think if they don't trust you, um,
Yeah.
they're not gonna go above and beyond and see the purpose in that. And so it's really relationship based, human based work that we're all doing.